I never thought one night could change everything. A single evening with my brothers that would follow me for the rest of my life. Something happened that night, something that I can't shake off. Something I've never told anyone until now. It's hard to explain. But I have to. I have to share it, because maybe, just maybe, someone else has been through something like this. Or maybe no one has. Either way, it's something I'll never forget. What I'm about to tell you, it's raw. It's painful. And it's something I'm still trying to understand. Growing up, my parents were always busy with work. They did their best to provide for us, but it meant that my brothers and I had to learn how to look out for ourselves. Jason, being the oldest, took on that role without ever questioning it. He was the one who made the decisions, who kept us in line. He was like a second dad to Ethan and me, always in charge, always protective, but sometimes a little too overbearing. Ethan, the middle child, was a completely different story. He was the one who made us laugh, who lightened the mood whenever things got tense. He had this way of making everything feel less serious, even when it wasn't. With him around, the weight of the world seemed a little easier to bear. And then there was me, the youngest. The one who was always caught in between the two. I admired Jason's strength and confidence, but at the same time, I often felt like I was being overshadowed by him. With Ethan, I was always the quieter one, the one who didn't joke as easily. I never quite knew where I fit in, and I often felt like I was just watching them from the sidelines. That weekend was supposed to be like any other. Our parents had planned a short trip, and we were left alone at home. No big deal. It was just another weekend for us to hang out, order pizza, watch movies, and relax. It was supposed to be simple, just a chance to unwind, but what was supposed to be a normal weekend, a time to just have fun, turned into something none of us could have predicted. And none of us were ready for how quickly things would shift. That night, as the hours wore on and the house grew quieter, Jason suggested we play a game to pass the time, truth or dare. It started out harmless enough, like any other time we played. We were laughing, tossing out silly dares and truth questions. What's the most embarrassing thing you've ever done, or I dare you to drink a whole cup of ketchup. We all took turns making each other do ridiculous things, and for a while, everything felt like it always had, but then, the tone of the game started to change. It wasn't just playful anymore. The questions became more personal, more probing. It wasn't long before Ethan, never one to back down from pushing boundaries, dared Jason to reveal his biggest secret. Jason smirked at first, like he knew something we didn't. He leaned back in his chair, looking at us like we'd crossed some invisible line. Only if you're ready for things to get real, Jason said. His voice had changed, it was deeper now, almost challenging. The smirk was still there, but there was something else in his eyes. A tension. A promise. A warning, and then it hit me, the room had changed. The air between us had thickened, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. What had been a fun game only minutes ago suddenly felt serious. We weren't just messing around anymore. This wasn't the kind of game you played with your family. This wasn't the kind of game that would leave you laughing after. Ethan seemed unfazed, but I could tell he felt it too. There was a pause, an unspoken moment when everything seemed to hang in the balance. I could sense both brothers staring at each other, waiting for something to give. And then, Jason turned to me. "Your turn," he said, his voice almost a challenge. Truth or dare? It was my moment, and the weight of that question hit me harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to say truth, to play it safe. To back out of whatever this had become. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the pressure of the moment, maybe it was the way they were both watching me. Either way, I chose dare. I didn't know it then, but that choice would be the point of no return. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, that something was about to change. What I didn't realize was how much it would change everything after that night. Jason dared me to sit closer to Ethan. At first, I thought it was a joke, a part of the game, something to lighten the mood. But when I looked at their faces, when I saw how serious they were, I felt my stomach twist. There was no laughter. No teasing. Just them, staring at me with a look I'd never seen before. It wasn't a brotherly look. It was different. I hesitated for a second, trying to laugh it off, but the tension was already so thick between us. I couldn't ignore it. Slowly, I scooted closer to Ethan, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself it was just part of the game, but as soon as I settled beside him, everything felt wrong. He didn't pull away. Instead, he put his arm around me, like it was nothing, like this was just how things were supposed to be. The warmth of his body pressed against mine felt too close, too intimate. It didn't feel like a sibling hug anymore. His fingers were firm against my shoulder, his touch too lingering, too purposeful. I could feel my breath catch in my throat, but I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. I wanted to scream at myself to get up and walk away, but my body refused to listen. Ethan's arm stayed around me, and I could feel his eyes on me, like he was studying my reaction. I could smell his cologne, a sharp, familiar scent that usually comforted me, but now it made me sick to my stomach. I wanted to pull away, but the more I tried to, the more it felt like I was being drawn in, like I was trapped in something I couldn't control. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, Jason shifted beside me. He moved closer, too close. He leaned in and whispered something to me, something I didn't quite hear. The words felt like they were meant for me alone, meant to push me further into this moment. I didn't know if I was imagining it, but his gaze wasn't the way it usually was. It was darker, filled with something I couldn't place. It made my skin crawl, but it also made my heart race. It felt like he was waiting for me to say something, anything, that would give him permission to do whatever he wanted. The air between us had completely shifted. I felt like I was suffocating, like I couldn't breathe, and yet I couldn't escape either. Ethan was still holding me, and Jason was on the other side, his gaze never leaving me. I wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, but my body was frozen in place. I couldn't make a sound. I couldn't make a move. Jason leaned even closer, his lips brushing against my ear as he whispered, "Do you trust me?" I felt his words like a jolt of electricity, making my whole body tense. But before I could process what he meant, Ethan turned my face toward him. He didn't say anything, he just kissed me. At first, it was a soft kiss, like he was testing the waters, but it quickly became more forceful, more urgent. My mind screamed at me to stop, to push him away, but my body didn't listen. His lips were so warm, his hands so firm on my skin, and I felt myself completely caught in the moment. Before I could pull away, Jason kissed me too. His kiss was different, harder, more insistent. He didn't give me a chance to pull back. I couldn't think. I couldn't make sense of what was happening. I was too lost in the confusion of it all, too paralyzed by the shock and the fear. As soon as Jason kissed me, my whole world seemed to stop. His lips were hard against mine, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My heart was racing, and for a moment, it felt like time had frozen, like nothing existed except the three of us. I felt trapped. Not just in the moment, but in my own body. I wanted to pull away, I wanted to scream at them to stop, but I couldn't. My body just wouldn't respond. Jason's kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't the kind of kiss I expected from a brother. It was possessive, demanding. He pulled me closer, and his hand slipped to my neck, tilting my head back so that I had no choice but to let him deepen the kiss. It wasn't soft, it wasn't affectionate, it was as if he was taking something from me, something I couldn't get back. That I felt Ethan's hand on my back, moving slowly but purposefully, as though he was making sure I stayed in place. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to do anything, but all I could do was sit there, completely frozen, my mind screaming in panic, my body caught between fear and something else I couldn't name. Jason's hand slid down to my waist, and for a brief second, I almost couldn't feel it. My body was numb, my thoughts clouded with confusion. It felt like I was losing control of everything. My brothers, the people I had trusted my whole life, were no longer the people I thought I knew. It felt like they were two strangers now, like something deep inside them had shifted, something that was now unraveling all around me. When I finally broke the kiss, gasping for air, I looked at them, my eyes wide in panic. But neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. They knew what they were doing. Jason didn't look at me like he used to, like I was his little sister. Now, there was a hunger in his eyes, something dangerous, something that made my skin crawl and my heart race all at once. Ethan shifted closer, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered, "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" His words made my stomach turn, but at the same time, something about the way he said it made me question myself. Was I really responsible for this? Had I somehow invited this? The guilt and shame started to creep in, but I still couldn't bring myself to stop it. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run out of that room and never look back. But my body didn't move. I felt paralyzed, caught in a web of confusion, shame, and something darker that was just starting to take hold of me. I looked at Jason, my brother, the one who had always been my protector, the one who had always made me feel safe. But now, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who any of us were anymore. Jason's hand slid along my side, and it felt like a spark of electricity jolting through me. I wanted to cry, to scream, but nothing came out. All I could do was sit there, trapped in this moment. Ethan, still sitting beside me, leaned in again, brushing his lips against my ear. "You don't have to say anything," he whispered. "We can just let this happen." And before I could react, before I could even think about what to do next, Jason kissed me again, harder, more urgently. He pushed me back into the couch, his hands roaming, and for the first time, I felt completely overwhelmed by everything that was happening. I could feel their hands all over me, their touch no longer playful, but possessive. Jason kissed me again, this time with more intensity, his hands moving under my shirt. I wanted to stop him, to push them away, but I couldn't. The fear was paralyzing. I felt numb, as though my body was no longer mine. Ethan was right there, his lips trailing down my neck as his hand slid up my leg. I couldn't process what was happening, what they were doing. It was like I was outside of my own body, watching everything happen but unable to stop it. I didn't know how to stop it. The more they kissed me, the more the world around me felt like it was falling apart. I wanted to tell them to stop, to make it stop, but the words wouldn't come. My mind was screaming, but my body wasn't listening. After it was over, no one spoke. We just sat there, unable to move, the weight of what had happened hanging in the air. Jason was the first to break the silence. "We don't talk about this. Ever." His voice was cold, and Ethan just nodded. We all knew things had changed. The bond we had as siblings was gone, replaced by guilt and something darker. For weeks, we avoided each other. Family dinners became unbearable. Every time Jason or Ethan looked at me, I felt that wave of guilt, heavy, suffocating. I wanted to say something, to tell someone, but how could I? Who could I trust with this? How could I explain the unexplainable? We couldn't talk about it, but it was all we thought about. Every glance, every silence between us reminded me of what we had crossed, what we had lost. I saw it in their eyes, something that used to be familiar but now felt distant, cold. And I couldn't escape it. It was like living in a house with ghosts. The silence was deafening. And the worst part? I was alone with my thoughts, unable to share the burden with anyone. It was like we were all pretending nothing happened, but we all knew. We all felt it. And there was no going back. It's been years since that night, but it still haunts me. The memories flash in my mind without warning, those moments of confusion, guilt, and pain. I've spent countless nights asking myself, why didn't I stop it? Why did it even happen? I've come to realize that healing isn't something that happens overnight. It's been a long, painful journey, and some days, I still feel that weight. Therapy has helped me see that the shame I carried for so long doesn't define me. It doesn't make me who I am, but it's a part of my story. The healing process? It's not easy. It's slow, but it's happening. Little by little, I'm finding my way out of that darkness. I'm not sharing this story to shock you or make you uncomfortable. I'm sharing it because silence, those unspoken secrets, only make the pain worse. For years, I carried this burden alone, thinking I was the only one, that I would never be understood. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're never really alone. If you've ever faced something you couldn't talk about, something that's eating you up inside, I want you to know you're not alone. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to seek help. It's okay to heal. We all have our struggles, but we don't have to face them in silence. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. Sharing this hasn't been easy, but I hope it resonates with someone out there who's been through something similar. If you've ever faced a moment of silence or struggle, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Drop a comment below and let's talk. If you want to hear more real, raw stories like this, stories that are hard to share but important to hear, hit that subscribe button. We're in this together, and your voice matters. Stay strong, and take care of yourselves.